started. So, yeah, right here is fine. We're going to be working around the front of the truck. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Mike Morrison. My wife, Sarah Morrison's around here somewhere. There she is. We run Morrison's Outdoor Adventures. I've been doing four-wheel drive training now for about 11 years. Military groups, recreational groups, commercial groups, all kinds of stuff. We do guided trips, trail rides, you name it, four-wheel drive training, recovery training. But today, very grateful, ARB is letting us do a advanced tire repair class. So kind of a step past the typical just plug a tire, right? You know, occasionally on the trail we have to plug a tire, but normally that's kind of on-road stuff. So we're going to learn a little bit about some of the stuff that happens that's a little bit further than that, right? So what's some of the common things we run into with damage to tires on the trail? Well, we're aired down, right? So we're air our tires down. We all nod, yes, we air down every time off-road. So we air down, we run the chance of possibly breaking a bead, right? So we break a bead on a tire, we have to reset it. Or while we're aired down, we're getting mud and dirt and grime stuck just behind the lip of this rim here, and then we air back up and it compacts it every time, so it never really cleans itself out. So over time that builds up and we can develop a slow leak because it doesn't allow that bead to fully seat. Even things like sticks and stuff can get jammed in there, and wood chips can get jammed in there. And so we're gonna have to break the bead to clean that off. Or worst case scenario, right? Very common thing that happens is we shear off our valve stem. So that's what we're gonna start with today is, you know, in the event we shear off our valve stem, but if that happens, your tire's gonna deflate super fast, right? It's gonna be pretty quick. The first tool you're going to want to get out is a good tire repair kit, right? I carry this particular one because it's the most complete that you can kind of buy out of the box, and there's just a few items I add to it. The reason, a couple of reasons why I like it more than the rest, it comes with my needle nose pliers, right? So I have them in my tire repair kit. I can remove stuff. I can feed a plug into the plug tool, things like that. It comes with a nice razor knife. It comes with a ton of plugs. If you buy this kit and you use all these plugs, you might need to look at your driving style, right? So in the event of a sidewall cut or something like that, you have plenty of plugs to work on that. It comes with some tire lube so that you can easily get your reamer in there or your needle tool in there and get the plug in place. Some of these off-road tires are really hard compound, so it's hard to plug them when you have to do that. So the lube helps out with that. This is my favorite part about the kit, hands down. It comes with extra Schrader valves. This is what's inside of the valve core, spring loaded, so that air can be forced into the tire, but then not be allowed to exit. So these little guys right here, when you smash a valve stem or you forget to put it back in or you lose it because it shoots out of the way, it's nice to have extras. It comes with extra valve stem caps, and the ones that they put in here have an O-ring in the top, so even if you have a little leaky Schrader valve, you can tighten these down and it will stop that leak temporarily. So the valve stem caps are nice to carry. It also comes with 2 extra valve stems, which is huge, right? Valve stems aren't expensive until you need them. Then they're going to be worth their weight in gold. But this is the most important tool right here. This little 4-way valve stem tool or valve core tool. So this is like a 25-cent tool, but it is the best thing to carry. I always keep one in my pocket. It's got a forked end for removing the Schrader valve. It's got this end for repairing the threads that the Schrader valve goes into. Then it has this one in case you crush the tip of your valve stem. You can actually spread it back apart with that one and cut new threads in. And then it's got one so you can screw it down on top of your valve stem. So this little tool right here is great to carry. The other big reason I like this kit is it comes with metal T-handle tire repair tools. Do not, and I'm gonna say this again, do not go to Walmart or somewhere else and get plastic handled ones, because again, these tires are very tough. They're off-road tires. When you go to plug them, these things will break. I've seen the handles, the plastic handles break, and then it goes through your hand. Now you're plugging your hand and the tire, right? So make sure you've got the nice metal T-handle ones. You're gonna have to put some pressure into it when you go to plug it. The other great thing is with this particular one, it's got this slide stop on it. So when you get the plug in, you don't actually push the plug all the way into the tire. And then you're like, oh, that worked for nothing. So it stops it, then you hold that against the tire as you pull out, and it keeps the plug in place. So it's a very good kit. And then there's just a few items that I add to it, like ether and things like that. So now, we've broken our valve stem. Maybe we just cut it or we crushed it. Either way, before we start breaking the bead on this tire, the first thing that we need to do is remove that valve core if we can, right? If it's still in place, we want to remove that valve core, that Schrader valve, out of the inside of the tire. Because if there's any air in there, we want to let it all out if possible. But as we start trying to compress this tire down, it's going to have to let some air out. So we take that Schrader valve out, set it off to the side, try not to lose it, but they're tiny. Now we're going to look at breaking this tire bead. So if we wanted to break this tire bead, obviously the answer is kind of set up in front of us, but if we wanted to break it, you can't just jump up and down on it, right? Because that bead that is set around the rim, the actual tire, has a really thick, about the size of my pinky, steel cable that runs all the way around, and it pops over that ridge, right? So it's set, it's very strong. So standing on it, bouncing on it's not gonna break it. Even trying to drive the vehicle on it a lot of times will not break it. You have to put pressure right next to the rim and push down to get that bead to break. What happens normally if I try to drive over it, with the vehicle, because you got to drive over the side of the tires, the tire pops up and then it rolls off down the mountain and you're hopping out of the truck chasing after it. Ask me how I know, right? So the easiest way is using a jack and the weight of the vehicle to do that, okay? So we can use the weight of the vehicle and a jack lifting it up, and the foot of the jack will push right down next to the rim, especially ARB's jack, because they have this nice little cutout on the foot of the jack, right? So it's cut out to go right next to the rim. It's round. It works too. The great thing about the high lift jack is we can put the nose right into their bumpers right here for a lifting point. You can see one on this side and one on this side, but we can adjust the nose up and down before we even start lifting the vehicle. So we don't have to worry about running a bunch of clicks or anything out of the way. Here's the other great thing about using specifically the ARB jack or the hydraulic style jacks is it's that easy, right? That's lifting the vehicle, using the weight, pushing down on it. It's that easy to lift it. So if I'm working and I'm by myself with my family, my wife and I and our 2 kids, we live in a camper, right? And we travel and do this training. If we're out there, then Sarah can continue to film me and see if I do something dumb, but I can also be like, hey boys, I don't want to do anything. Go jack up the truck, right? And even my 9-year-old can sit here and lift the truck up. So it's very easy. It's also very safe. Now, once we get everything situated and we're ready to start lifting this truck and using the weight, we need to take some safety precautions. Number 1, set your emergency brake. Make sure the truck is in park for number 2. And number 3, we need to chalk the tire. So if you carry the base plate from ARB, and this works with both the high lift and the ARB jack, it is the perfect wheel chalk. If you don't have one of these, grab a rock, grab whatever, but make sure you put it on your back tires so that as we lift, this truck's not going to roll down. Now, if I had any concern about this particular truck rolling anyway, then I can just have someone sit in the truck and hold brake, right? I could be like, hey, Sarah, you can't film today, get in the truck and hold brake. Or I could even put one of my boys in there to hold brake, but they may, scare me a little bit and pop that brake out. So a lot of times when you are using a jack to break that tire bead, you're gonna have to stand on the tire because it's gonna wanna come up a little bit. So normally I'll just come over here and squat down and keep my weight on the tire, but I can start lifting the truck and you can actually hear the air escaping out of that valve stem. So we see the foot of the jack pushing down on that tire. There we go. So once it breaks it down a little bit, then we can just set right there, just walk our way around it, and it'll fall in. Now I don't let the truck back down yet, right? Leave the truck lifted, because now it makes it really easy for me to get in here and access what I need to access, right? Notice I position my valve stem close to my jack, not all the way at my jack, but close to it, right? That way it kind of pushes down right here, and I'm not sitting here trying to stand on it to remove the valve stem or work. The reason I don't put the valve stem right on it is because most modern vehicles have tire pressure monitoring systems, also known as TPMS. The sensor is right on the inside, so if you jack right there at it, chances are you're gonna break it. They're about $130 to $150. I don't like spending that money, right? So now we're ready to remove the valve stem. This is where your razor knife comes into play. You can use your knife, but it is hard to get in there and cut, so I like to just use the cheap little replaceable knives. Cutting away from your body, but if you have one of the metal valve stems, you actually need an 11 millimeter and take the nut off the outside and it'll just fall to the inside. If you have tire pressure monitoring system on there, the sensor on the inside, you need a little Torx bit to take that off. And you're gonna have to take it off before you can pull your valve stem all the way through. So I can't remember what it is, but it's a little tiny Torx bit. But we wanna make sure that we get that TPMS sensor out of the tire. We don't want it rolling around in there while we're cutting. But now, make sure that you're right next to the base of that valve stem and just start cutting back and forth. And you'll start shaving it off a little bit. I'm actually gonna pass around the one I removed yesterday, but you can kind of see what it looks like and where I cut at. But then I'm gonna take this 4-way tool and I'm gonna screw it down onto the valve stem, because now I got a handle that I can start pulling on this to see if I can just pop it right out.
That's fixed inside the attached tire.
So it is attached to the wheel. Now, if you have like the old school tubes and things like that, because we're seeing some older vehicles back on the road again, they could have a tube in there as a repair from an older kind of time, then it's going to be attached to that tube. So once you cut off a little bit, you see it just pops right out like that, right? So I've removed my valve stem. Nice and easy. Now, for the next one, to install it, go ahead, take your cap off, go ahead and take your Schrader valve out of the valve stem, right? Before you even install it. The reason being is when we go to set that tire bead, we're gonna use the air compressor and we don't want anything slowing the air down. So take it and feed it through from the inside out. Once it's fed through, again, take your 4-way tool right here, screw it on, and just snug it on there. It doesn't have to be tight. Now, just pull and work it around, right? And you'll feel it pop right into place over that ridge as that one's getting passed around. If it's a deep dish wheel or it has the little guard right there and you can't get your hands in there, you can take a shoelace, tie it in a loop or 550 cord in a loop, and just loop it around these 2 points, and now your hand's out here. All you're doing is working it around until it pops through. It doesn't take a lot of pressure. If you're still having a hard time, put a little lube on it, or it's kind of gross, spit on it and then push it through, right? So now we have a new valve stem in our tire. It's pretty easy, right? Now, one good thing to do while you have the tire bead broken down is go around this inside edge, right? Go ahead and clean it, just in case. Or if you did have a slow leak there, that's why we're in anyway, so we can go ahead and clean it. The easiest way to do that is to, because it's gonna be packed really tight, is to take a water bottle, poke a couple holes in the top so it's like a shower head, and squirt it around that bead to soak it, then taking something like a screwdriver or a little putty scraper or something, you can scrape that dirt and stuff out. It's gonna fall into the tire. There's not much you can do about that. And then just take a wet cloth or something to get the last little bit out, okay? But once we clean that bead down, now we can go ahead and let the truck down. Now, how many of us have used a high lift jack in the down position? That's kind of the scary time, right? The high lift jack, that's when we can get a runaway jack and stuff like that. It's also when we're really having to let down the weight or lock. Now, again, nothing against the high lift jack. I use it for all kinds of things, but I'm very experienced with it. But with the ARB jack, when we want to let down the truck, we just hold this little red button right here, and the truck just settles right down. Once most of the weight's off the truck, we just lean on the jack, and it just compresses right down.
I'm sure they will.
Now we can move it right on out of place. That's some of the basic repairs we would typically do, and a reason why we may have to debead the tire. Now here comes the hardest part, and that's rebeading the tire, right? So we have to set this tire bead now and get it to pop back into place. When you take it to a tire shop, normally they're using a tire machine or those cheetah blasters that put a big burst of air down to it very quickly. Yes, you can use ether. I don't teach that here. That's more of a kind of one-on-one thing, yeah. But I prefer ether, but it's not a YouTube video type of ether. I'm not over here, right? Or you can use some type of ratchet strap to pull this center in. The best thing to do, and the only air compressor I've seen really work well and consistently seat tire beads, is specifically the ARB twin compressor, because it's 100% duty cycle and it pushes enough CFM to set that tire bead. Yesterday we set the tire bead in this class in about 8 seconds. It blew my mind. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. So it was even a really fast one. But we need that big burst of air going in to set that tire bead. So what I'll do a lot of times, if I'm using an air compressor or something like that, I'll pick the tire up like this, give it a couple of bounces, just kind of push that wall out, maybe roll it back and forth and put some weight on it to make sure that that bead's getting as close to that ridge on the inside as I can. Then, I remember I took out that Schrader valve, right? Greg, you want to start it up for me? So with air compressors, your trucks need to be running because they're pulling a ton of amperage, right? But I also prefer to use an inflator like this with a really long hose so that I can get a little bit back from the tire. I don't want to be right up next to it, close to that bead. We're keeping all of our fingers clear, so all we really need to do is take this, flip it on, and then we can stand back and listen. So did you hear that quick psh, and then it went quiet? That's because the bead's set, right? If it doesn't set, it's going to be very loud, whoosh of air coming out. But now we just start adding air to it until we hear the bead pop into place. And this is normally where I start talking to the class and I forget what I'm doing, then it pops into place. You hear me scream like a little girl, right? So, but you're seeing it start to work its way around. This is where some of these tires or wheels, like the Method, it takes a little bit more pressure to set them. Oh, there we go. That wasn't even loud. So it takes a little bit more pressure to set them, right? Because they have that little ridge on the inside, just like it takes a little bit more to debead them. So now that we've aired it up, we're already at about 10 PSI. I can go ahead and air this tire up to the PSI I want. Normally I'll go a little past that, because when I take this off, I'm gonna have to put that Schrader valve in place, so I'm gonna lose a little bit. But I'm able to put a whole lot more air in there quicker because that Schrader valve is out, right? So go up to whatever, if you're on the trail, whatever your trail pressure is, or if you're on the road, make sure you're going to your road pressure. Now, I'm not gonna air it all the way up right here, so I'm gonna go up just a little bit. And while I'm airing it up, this is why I have kids, so they can do all this stuff for me, right? Schrader valve, and I get out my 4-way tool. All right, we're at about 16.5. Let's go up a little more so we're at trail pressure. All right, we're at 19 PSI. So I normally run about 18 on most standard trails unless I'm on the beach or something. But go ahead and get this ready, right? See how I'm holding it together in my finger? Because I want to secure it because there's going to be air coming out. I get it in there and I start installing that Schrader valve. Now, you don't have to romp on that Schrader valve. It just needs to be snug, right? We don't want to really romp on it. You can screw it and break those threads on the inside. So just snug it in place. I lost a little bit. I'm at 16 and a half, so I bump it back up to 18. 18 and a half. Got to be perfect, right? Now we're good to go. So last piece, make sure that you install your valve stem cap back, right? That's kind of part of why I like those. Thank you, Greg. Why I like the caps that have the O-rings in them. They're typically a little bit more expensive, but also if you spend time in colder climates, right, where it drops below freezing and you're going through mud and stuff, water can get into the ones without the O-rings and it gets by that Schrader valve. Then at nighttime it freezes and it pushes the Schrader valve in and it'll let air out overnight. You wake up and be like, my tires are flat, but you can't find a leak. It'll drive you nuts for days, right? So keep that in mind. So that's the type of tire repairs we can do and still drive on the road. Okay, so let's talk briefly about other types of tire repair, like a sidewall cut. Okay, if you are not running BFG tires, you run the chance of cutting your sidewalls. So I had to borrow this tire and promise him I'm not going to plug it or cut it, right? So, but if you cut a sidewall on a tire, there is no permanent repair that you can do to that tire. It will never go on the road again. Let me repeat that. It will never go on the road again, right? So if you slice a sidewall open, you can do a repair that is trail ready. Typically what I'll do is I'll get out a couple of packs of these right here. What they are is they're a piece of rope with really sticky compound on them. So I'll go ahead and pull them out. I'll pull one out right here. But you can see they're even sticking to my finger. But I pull them out and I push one side of that slit open and I fold these in half. And I start laying them in. And I'll lay, 5, 10, 15, whatever, right? Until I can pack it as full as I can of these. Then I'm gonna start trying to add air to it and listen for leaks. Now chances are I'm not gonna get 100% seal, but if I can slow it down enough to where I can drive for a couple miles and air up again, then I am. The key is how much air you put in the tire. Don't try to air it up to road pressure. Air it up 15, maybe 18 PSI. Drive on, right? If you put too much air pressure on it, then it's gonna blow all of these out and it's gonna look like little octopus tentacles coming out of the tire, and then it's gonna pop out and be on the side of the road somewhere. Look like a nasty little gumball thing on the side of the road. So keep the air pressure low, drive slow until you can get back to the road, then call AAA, right? They'll come get you. So that's a sidewall repair. The only other tire repair that would be considered a permanent repair, right, is if you take a nail or something like that and it's in between the insides of my thumbs here. Anything in there could be plugged and it would be a permanent repair. You can even plug it by yourself on the trail, but that's not considered a permanent repair. You need to take it to a shop and they plug it from the inside, right? I run a lot of plugs, but you should go get it permanently repaired. Now, I've tried the patches, like the patches on the inside on the tread and the patches on the sidewall. When we air down the tire off-road, it's really hard to get those patches to stick because that tire's flexing and those patches just tend to fall off. That, and you have to get really good access. Normally you have to completely unseat the tire and take it off the rim to try to do that. So I typically don't rely on those for like sidewall fixes and stuff like that. But for typical like tire repair, normally if I'm on an overland trip or something along those lines, what I'll do is if I have to replace my tire off the truck, put my spare on, and I'll wait till I get to camp. Then I can have a beer, fix my tire, hang out and do my thing, right? I'm not rushed to do it on the trail. The biggest thing is slow down and take your time, because number one, we're lifting the vehicle. Normally we've got a tire off of it, so the vehicle could be in a precarious spot. We just want to be sure of what we're doing, right?